My name is Mike, and I'm the Math EPP here at Nevada Department of Education. I would like to acknowledge the presence of Matt Copeland from Metametrics and the director of Quantile and Lexile. I would like also to acknowledge the presence of David Barnes, who is in flight and in between flights, I should say. He made himself available. He is our program director or program manager for Quantile at Metametrics. With us is Mark Rincon, our ELA EPP at NDE. And I'd like to call on, maybe I'll start with Matt, just introduce ourselves.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Matt Copeland. I'm Director of Educator Engagement and Implementation here at Metametrics, creators of the Lexile framework for reading and the Quantile framework for mathematics. Our team stands ready to help you all there in Nevada to get the most out of Lexile and Quantile measures across the state.
Thank you, Matt. I'd like to call on David, if he's able to tune in.
Hello, everybody. You probably can't see me. It's pretty dark in the car because I'm on the East Coast. But my name is David Barnes. I'm the Quantile person here at Metametrics. I work for Math. And as Matt said, we're here to help you with whatever we can do, whatever you need. That's our job, is to help you implement these measures and get the most out of them.
Thank you, David. Let's hear from Mark.
Thank you, Mike. Like Mike had mentioned, my name is Mark Rincon. I am the English K-12 education programs professional, and it's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon.
Next, I'd like to call on Allison.
Hi, I'm Allison Jones, and I'm a principal in Clark County.
Thank you. Thank you, Allison. And we have Jennifer Steele.
Hi, all. I am at Somerset Academy, the Stephanie campus. I'm a charter school here in Henderson, and I'm the assistant principal. I'm sorry, my camera is not working, so here we are.
Oh, that's okay. So thank you very much for coming on this webinar or admin series. I was hoping to invite a lot. I invited 700 people, and probably because of a lot of commitment, they were not able to be here. I'd like to share my screen so you can see the flow. So basically the agenda, we would like to have 4:10 to 4:30 my presentation regarding Quantile. And then we have a 10-minute question and answer. And then we're going to proceed to Lexile presentation. And then another 10-minute for question and answer. So let me share my screen. Okay. So I hope you all get this. And this is a way for you to be able to go back if you miss something in our discussion here. This would be on forever as long as it's in the drive, and you can go back whenever you need some refreshing. So our flow today is we're going to talk about what is Quantile, and here it's a framework for mathematics. This is used by Smarter Balance and many others, MAPS testing, and many other companies uses the framework to gauge the assessments. Okay, so there's a measure for student and a measure for mathematical skills that are being merged into quantitatively, and we would be able to determine their skill level and their ability to take those concepts Okay. So if I forget, you can click on attendance for purposes of certificate. And you can submit that anytime you want during this presentation. And then I'm going to invite you to the PowerPoint. Okay, so this is just some stuff that they require us to sign in, and then exit survey. And you know, if you are able to turn on your camera, please do so. Okay. So our objective here is to use Quantile framework in interpreting the NWA MAPS testing scores. And then we learn the resources related on the Quantile measure. And then how can we pull resources out of that? And then hopefully you as principals or building supervisors, you'd be able to answer or share or duplicate this PD to your classroom teachers so they'd be able to use them in their instruction. So as I mentioned, Quantile measure is a framework where its skill and concept is determined by a measure indicated by number. Okay. So for example, you would see something like 410Q, that's the Quantile measure. And then let's move on. So if you can see, there's it measures math readiness and complexity on the same scale. So you measure students' ability to receive the instruction, and it also measures the lesson. And if you notice, there's EM, which stands for Emerging Math, 300Q, up to all the way to some numbers above 700. Okay. So teachers can use the measures to determine materials by increasing the difficulty or determining also the prerequisite skills. It can provide reteaching or pre-teaching of prerequisite, and also be able to locate materials or resources for individualized teaching, like for kids that needs remedial or kids that needs enrichment. So since we believe that parents can also be a good partner in the instruction, so parents would also be able to locate additional instruction materials, and they can do that with their kids at home. And I will show you that later, and we can do it together. Okay. And so there's a lot of tools in the Quantile Hub. We're going to focus on math at homework and math skills database. And there's other tools that you can look into, but our main focus today is math at home and math skills database. So here is an example of a report from MapScore. This is for mathematics. You would usually see how many these details here, and then the scoring. This is what they call RIT. And then on the different instructional areas, they have another RIT. So if you can see at the bottom here is the Quantile measures, and a lot of the teachers don't know what is this. And they are related by a map. A table, I should say. So if you notice, we have on our example 1, we have a 220 RIT score, and that's the Quantile measure for that is 765Q to 865Q. That it's related to this map, which I had it for your convenience. So if you look at 220 right here, so that's how they put the range equivalent of the RIT score. So every student would have this score, and it's up for the teacher to determine what are the appropriate skill or prerequisite skill, focus skill, or impending skill that needs to be done for that particular student. So, and then here's another sample score for the same student, this time taken in spring. And the score becomes better at 234. And now the quantile measure is 1005Q to 1105Q. Again, if you go back to the table, so you can find 234, and that's the range of the quantile measure for that particular score. Now, I'd like to welcome you. If you want to follow around with me, we can do this together. So what you can do is you can open your laptops, and then we can go into going to the hub. So to go to the hub, you can click this Math at Home. And so I'm just gonna split my screen by clicking Windows arrow left. And then I'm gonna go Math at Home. Okay, so I'm gonna go Math at Home. And then I'm gonna go there. Okay. So, okay. So at my home, you can see that, okay, let me, instead of going to this, I'll just go back to the score. And then we're gonna discuss the tree later. So this is, so you notice if you go to hub.lexile.com, these are the quantile tools, okay? And then you know that our quantile measure is 765. Range of 765, that's the minimum, and then the maximum is 865. So what you're gonna do is you can add 50 on 765, or you can subtract 50 from 865, and that's the number you're gonna put here. Okay, that number is 815. And then I'm gonna select 5th grade, because this is my my daughter. She's in 5th grade. And then so we're gonna be Nevada. So you can plug this and then do a search. And then if you click search, you get a lot of resources here. If I'm a parent and I wanted to let my kids do something at home, I can choose some activity here. I can filter it by activity, and that's the activity on that level. Okay, so I can choose, okay, maybe I'll do this activity for her. And then there's this activity that the parent can do or ask the kid to do. And then if you want, if I'm a teacher and I need a lesson plan for that particular kid, so I can choose lesson plans here. Let's say this one, and I can find examples here. So this is the circle, there's a lesson here. And so the teacher can give that specific kid certain lesson that is within his or her score. Okay, so by knowing this kid's quantile measure, we would be able to find resources that's appropriate for the kid, and that we are assured that this kid is receptive or be able to receive that concept. You can also ask the kid, okay, is this difficult for you? So if you notice, if I click this, then the quantile measure is lower. If it's easy, then it's gonna be higher. Okay, if it's just right, then it's gonna be, so see, if it's just right, then it's gonna be so see, if it's easy, then the quantile measure is higher, the range is higher. If it's difficult for the kid, if you ask the kid, hey, is this difficult, if this lesson be difficult here, so it's adjusted to lower the range. Or if it's just right, so you're gonna choose that number. So again, depending on the kid's ability, because this is a very targeted score here. If you notice, this is 815. So, and that's the range, that's for this particular kid. So we can target the kid's ability individually. Okay. And this is nice thing about this is these are resources that are free and ready to use. And Metametrics has done a lot of research regarding this, that this is appropriate for the kid for that particular level. Now, any question regarding that? Okay, the second tool that I'm gonna introduce is similar to this, but we're gonna go to the database. Okay, so we know that if you want to know what are the prerequisites for that particular skill, then we need to go to the database, or you can go to teacher assistant. But I'd rather go to the database because I can do a keyword search. Say, for example, I'm in a hurry, I got a lot of things going on. So I said, okay, I have to teach this kid algebraic expression. Okay, so I'll type that, and then I'll just search. Okay, so then I have a lot of different QSC, or the quantile scales concept levels. And then you can see the measure. So if you have 220, that means it's a lower level. If you have around 600, that's about there for a low struggling fifth grader, like that. Or if it's 1,000, that means, oh, it's a higher, you can go to, this might be a level at the algebra, ninth grade. Let's try to click that. And so you can have a prerequisite cluster, supporting skills, and then impending skills. Now, if you want to see the resources associated with that focus QSC, then you can just click on resources, and then you can click one of this, and then there you can start, you can give them your instruction or let them do something. Okay, so or you can say, okay, let's learn some exponent song. So there's a video that posts, and there's that. Okay, so as a teacher, it will be convenient for me because I can simply look at the different, I can simply search by keyword. If I know specific QSC or specific quantile score, then I can go back and go to the skills database, and then I can select the grade. I can select Nevada, and then I can select the grade level, 5th grade, and then I can select, so I can select the goals. So this, for 5th graders, these are the standards for Nevada. And then I can just say, okay, I want to interpret fractions as a division of numerator by denominator, like that, and then search. And then so you have the resources here on this tab, and then you have the skills. Okay, so if you click on the resources as what we always wanted, so there's 2 QSC, one for a lower level and one for a higher level. So if you click that, you go back to this information where you would know what's the prerequisite skills, and you know what's the supporting skills, and you know what's the impending skills. And then most of the teacher would like to always search for a resource. So, and then you can give this as a resource for the student. Okay, and so there's activity here. So these are activity that are done by research to be helpful for that particular QSC. And so these are resources that teachers can really use in the classroom, especially if the classroom has a multi-level, like there's some advanced kids, there's some very low kids, there's IEP inclusion, and there's this normal kids. So this is very good for differentiating the instruction for individual kids. And so far I've shown you, and I hope you did it too on your laptops, 2 different tools that are necessary or important or helpful to our classroom. Let me see if my time is good. So yeah, we have 3 minutes in addition to the question and answer. So the table is now open for any questions. Okay, any
Is
questions?
this hub lexile.com? Is that, I see up at the top it says register and sign in, but you were doing things and I could do things too without signing in.
Yeah,
But do the teachers have to would they register, or can they just go into this?
yeah, they can just go into this without registering. The advantage for being registered is they can save all their resources that they have selected and then go back to those resources every time they need it. So that's the only difference. But on the fly, if they just wanted to see this and then sign it a kid, and then they don't have to be registered, they can use it freely.
So the activities that are aligned with the quantile number, they're based on that quantile number. So they're not to, the depth of knowledge questioning. It's not a low DOK level. It's based on where that number is.
Yeah. So it's based on that number, but the teacher has the option to look into what really is going on with the kid and determine if the kid seems to say that, based on the feedback of the kid, they say, oh, this is still difficult for me, despite the test result is to be on that level, then you can adjust. So then you can always adjust. Okay, maybe if that kid is saying, okay, let's say, let me go back to this home thing because that's easier for me. And I'm just gonna press on this because that's the one I know. And then I'm just gonna go back to Nevada. And so this is where, so for example, when you try this to the kid and then the kid says, oh, this is difficult for me. So then you can always go, so he says it's difficult. So you would find a range that's around 550 or 600. So yeah, I would type 600.
But it's difficult because of the activity that the student chose to do. They give you feedback.
Yeah, of course. When you give the activity to the kid, and then the kid said, Mr. M, this is too hard for me. So you would go back here. Kids tells you it's difficult. Okay, so then you adjust. So you can adjust the level. And then if a teacher wanted to investigate more, and so he can go, or he or she can go to the database. And as I mentioned, the database would have very specific So for example, let's just have this. And then it goes here. And then if you click on that, there's a cluster of knowledge. And then you feel that this kids requires a little bit of front loading or prerequisite skills, then you click on this and get resources out of that skill. If as a teacher you said, okay, that this kid is really on it, but I think just a little bit, I need to give him more support, so I'll click either of these three. And if they're advanced and you think that, oh, they're a super achiever, so I can click the kid on the impending skills. These are the future skills. If we take a look at the knowledge illustration here, so usually there's a focus skill. This is the focus skill. This is the skill that's being targeted based on the score of the kid. And it's up for the teacher to determine a particular kid if he needs a prerequisite skills or he might need a supporting skills. So I know a lot of the kids now needs both of this because of the gap, because of pandemic or whatnot. So you can click on that. So based on this focus skills, you can click on that. Or same here, we went to 500Q and this prerequisite skills is this QSC 117 or QSC 162. So there's a teacher decision making that needs to be done based on what's the immediate feedback of the kid.
So the QSC on there is I went back to the map growth RTI to Quantile. So is the 165 the Quantile?
165, yes, it's a quantile number. So let me see. Oh, this one?
Yes.
Oh, QSC is the they call this quantile skills and concept. The measure associated to that can be different, that quantile number. So let's see what's
So if you went back to the one that you were showing with the score of a 200, right?
yes, let's go back there.
So then you're trying to,
So you're trying to
I'm
get
trying to figure out as a teacher,
Mhm.
how, if I have an expectation that this is the number that I need, and I can find somewhere there's a number where you want to have kids scoring at certain levels within the benchmarks of maps. So then let's say it's winter maps and my kids weren't scoring. Do I come here because you went specifically to a standard? Or let's say I'm teaching that in the fall. How do I use this to support and supplement what I'm doing with my kids?
Okay, so if we're talking about the whole class, like you
Yes.
wanted, okay, so that's where this teacher assistant would come. So so if you go to teacher assistant, oh, I forgot. So if you go to teacher assistant and then let me see. Let me see, and then you would so if you're talking about the class and then you wanted to have, let's say, certain standard, and then so then it goes so then when you click a certain standard for that class, and you can see that the kid should be at 750 and have a score of 620 for this particular skills and concept. And then those that are not below quartile range, These are the yellow ones. So these are their prerequisite skills that needs to be addressed before they would be ready to be able to understand this and this. Okay. I'd like to call on David if he's here. In addition to what I said, I'm not sure if he's here.
I am. I just got into my hotel room.
Okay, okay. Yeah. So in addition to what I said, is there any additional information you'd like to share with us?
The biggest thing I'm saying is just very quickly, you're absolutely right. You can get direct to the resources without creating a login or logging in. However, I do think if teachers take some time to log in, it doesn't take long once you've created an account. If you have an account, you can save those resources when you get to the resource list, and then you can create lists within that each have their own unique URL, and so you can use those to share those resources with other people, and it can be a really powerful tool. But you do have to create an account for that. Nevada teachers get a free account because of the partnership that we have with the state. So it's not like it costs anything at all. It just gives them access to be able to share those resources. And Mike, that's about all I would add. And you're doing great.
Okay, thank you, David. I'd like to show this to Allison. This is the grade level chart. Like, for example, if you're teaching a particular grade level, say 5th grade. So normally for kids that are on 50th to 90th percent, they should be at 715 to 960. Okay, that's including this percent of kids that are really good. So you can adjust this. And I would say if I wanted, what should be my level for, let's say, a 5th grader, and that they're testing at the beginning of the year. Okay, let's say beginning. Okay, I can choose beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year. So, and then I can see that for kids that should be on the 25th to 75th percentile, they should be at this. Their score should be between 550 to 795. So you can tell that this kid is very advanced to the grade level because his score is 765 to 865. So you probably
What is that? But it looks like it's the winter one, so
okay,
you
yeah,
would
yeah,
have to
okay.
move to winter.
That's right. You got me. Because this is winter, and so I'll put winter. Okay, and then I'll just close the other ones. And then let's say for winter, expectation would be 765 to 865. So the kids is within around here. This particular kid is within this range. And so if you want to normalize the classroom as a teacher, I usually go here. I would say, okay, this is like 50% of my class, like they should be there. So I would say, okay, my lesson should be around 570Q to 815Q. That should be my lesson for normal kids. If I would be dealing with kids that are super achiever, then it would give me an idea. Okay, my quantile score should be 815 to 940. That should be my quantile score. If I'll be dealing with some inclusion kids, not to say, let's say, and then some of them are really having a hard time. So I would say, okay, that's around this. If they're not there, then I have to look into if they're having difficulty, even with this score or quantile measure, then I have to go here and look into what are the prerequisite skill for that. And then I can start my discussion or lesson with this kids.
And you would get that on the teacher assistant part, because that would be in the yellow part, things that were leading up to that standard. So if you said, this is just general right here as a grade level.
Yeah.
So as a grade level, we want them to be at this quantile number.
That's right.
So if I'm looking as a teacher in the teacher assistant section, I might be looking at things within that Lexile, if I'm teaching those standards after the winter benchmark.
That's right.
Okay.
Any more questions? We have, let me see how many minutes. Okay, so if there are no questions, I would like to hand it over to our Lexile group. Mark would be doing his presentation for this. Let me see. Okay,
Thank you, Mike.
I'm gonna
Thank you for
stop
the great
sharing.
job on sharing that. A lot of information about quantiles. Really appreciate it. And Allison, thank you for those great questions. This is what we need. So like Mike had shared, Allison and others that are on this call are going to be watching this video. We are moving to creating some small short, actually some small Google sites where you can basically find information at your fingertips. And so this is still in development, but what I'm going to drop into the chat right now is a sample of what we've created for the Lexile framework. And our goal is to, again, it's not to replace the agency's website, but it's really to have something at teachers' fingertips where they can easily find information, get to resources quickly, and really have instructional strategies that are going to help their students. So what I just dropped into the chat is that a link to this landing page, and I'll go ahead and share my screen. And so right on your landing page, it basically gives you an introduction to Lexiles. Thinking about Lexile measures, it's really a resource for parents and educators that really focus on improving reading skills and also increasing adolescent literacy. With the Lexile measures, they can be used to match readers with texts, which will be going over tonight, targeting the student's reading ability. With targeting the reading material and reading, and helps monitor students' progress towards specific learning goals. So thinking about that and looking at the big picture, which I'm so grateful that I'm joined with the team for Metametrics, especially Matt Copeland here this afternoon. He's going to really dive deep into what the Lexile framework is and give you some general information about it. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Matt.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mike, for that great overview of the Quantile framework. Let me share my screen very quickly as well. Absolutely. These are great resources that are at your fingertips that are available to be used by classroom teachers, by assessment coordinators, by administrators, that all help you add another layer to your understanding of your assessment data. And that really is the advantage of both of these kinds of measures as we go forward. Excuse me. So very quickly, in this segment of the presentation, I want to cover a couple of quick topics. One, what exactly is the Lexile framework for reading? And we'll talk about the fact that it has two kinds of Lexile measures, both Lexile measures for readers, for students, but also Lexile measures for text. Then we'll move into, well, how can these two kinds of measures be used? And they can be used in two distinct ways. One, to monitor progress toward college career readiness, that phrase that's been with us now for more than a decade. But then also at the classroom level, or even at the home level, the family level, how do we match students with texts that, to go back to our Vygotsky, that are within that zone of proximal development, right? Think back to that old Goldilocks fairy tale. Goldilocks goes in the bear's cabin. She sits in 3 chairs. First one's too hard. Second one's too soft. Third one is just right. So how do we help students find the texts that are just right for their learning abilities at the moment? And then very quickly, just as Mike did, I'll try to share some of the free tools and research resources that are available for Lexile measures. Because you all are Nevada educators there in the state, you have free access to all of these materials. So very quickly, what is the Lexile framework for reading? At its barest element, this is a scale of measurement. So in addition to your scale scores from the Smarter Balanced Assessment or from NWA MAP, you have this second articulation of that student's performance on a common scale. So it's not unique to Smarter Balanced. It's not unique to the MAP RIT scale, but something that cuts across a variety of different assessments, a variety of different instructional programs, and a variety of different text resources that you may have at your fingertips. And one of the most important things to understand is, again, there are 2 kinds of Lexile measures. Lexile measures for students, which measure a student's reading comprehension ability, but also Lexile measures for text that measure the text complexity of the words, sentences, and paragraphs on the page. When you know both of those 2 measures, you're able to gauge that just right level for students and their text. As you notice on the right-hand side of this slide, the Lexile scale works much in the same manner as a thermometer. As we all know, regardless of whether you use Fahrenheit or Celsius, a thermometer measures temperature both above 0 and below 0. The Lexile scale works in much the same way. So the higher the Lexile measure, which you always know by a numeric number followed by a capital L, the higher the number on the student side means the more complex a student's reading skill is. On the text complexity side, the higher the number means the more complicated that text is. And just like a thermometer, our measures actually go below 0 as well. Now, on the Lexile scale, we do not use a negative sign. We never report a negative Lexile measure. No one wants to stigmatize a student or stigmatize a book, for that matter, with a negative Lexile value. In place of a negative, we use the abbreviation BR for a beginning reader, which indicates that this is a measure of a student just getting their feet wet in the waters of learning how to read, and they're not yet able to do it independently. So as you see here on this slide, so for example, a measure of BR 300L represents 300 Lexile measures below 0. So they still have 300 Lexile units to grow before they can really begin to take over that independent reading construct and begin to do that work. For many students in the K1, 2, 3 space, they will be below 0 on the Lexile scale. They will have that BR measure. It is not intended to be anything other than a statement that they're not ready to read on their own. They need a qualified classroom teacher. They need a parent to help them begin to digest the text that is there. So let me take a bit of a deeper dive into that scale and kind of walk it up, just so you have a sense of the kinds of texts that exist along various points of the scale. So I'm going to begin again below 0, so BR 180L, with this book, The Very Wet Dog. And I've included some quick screenshots of the pages of this book. As you will notice, there are very limited words. So we see here on page 2, in the car, and again on page 4, in the park. But as you can see, pages 3 and 5, the story is really told in pictures. The idea here is minimize the text. We're not even working in complete sentences. We're just trying to make that association between words on the page and concepts. As we come up a little bit more on the Lexile scale, here's MC Higgins's Fish Boy, which weighs in on the Lexile scale at 160L. Here you begin to see complete sentences. You begin to see a narrative that's taking place, and some pictures that still go along with that narrative to begin to tell the story. As we continue up, here's a title, Charlotte's Web, from the elementary years. Many of us probably remember reading as well as I do, at 680L. And then you see additional elements are begin to be introduced: dialogue, more figurative language, other elements that students begin to wrestle with and comprehend as they begin to wrestle with these texts. Moving on up, here's something above this simplification, the scale I have in the middle, at 940L, something from the Harry Potter series. As you can see here, it becomes much more words on the page, far fewer pictures, no pictures in this case, but really it is kind of that chapter book we always think about that really is designed not only for student readers, but for adult readers as well. And then continuing on, this slide sometimes elicits groans from folks who remember their own high school days. Something like Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter, with its very long, complex sentences, very verbose vocabulary, weighs in at 1420L. That's actually beyond what is required typically of freshmen at the university level. And in fact, the Lexile scale continues on. There is no upper limit to the Lexile scale. Here I'm showing a freshman university biology textbook called Sustaining Life that weighs in at 1600L. It's very representative of the kinds of texts, particularly in the nonfiction realm, that students may encounter in their post-secondary endeavors. But as I said, the scale has no upper limit. There are not many, but there are a small handful of books that actually have a Lexile measure above 2000L. So the scale really continues beyond not just a student's K-12 experience, but into college, into the workplace, into their lives, beyond our K-12 schooling. And that is one advantage, is that now students and their families, as they learn these measures, as they learn this scale, have a measuring stick that they can use throughout their lives to really understand, again, that relationship between reading ability and text complexity. So as I said before, there are two kinds of Lexile measures. And one of the most common questions we hear is, well, how are these Lexile measures calculated? So let me begin on the text measure side. When we talk about a Lexile measure of text, the Lexile algorithm takes into account two very different things: syntax and semantics. So when we're talking about syntax, we're talking about grammatical structure. the complexity of sentences and paragraphs. In short order, we boil that down to a numeric value, and we input that into our algorithm. Simultaneously, on the semantic side, we also measure the frequency of vocabulary. So a very simple word like me has a very low level of complexity. We all hear that word, we all see that word in print, seemingly almost every time we pick up a book. Other vocabulary we do not encounter very often. And if we do not encounter it often, chances are stronger that we may not recognize that word. And therefore, that word has a more complex measure of difficulty than does a simple word. So again, those two factors, syntax and semantics, go into the mathematical formula that's used to calculate the difficulty of a particular piece of text, again, reported back on that very same Lexile scale. On the other side of that two measures coin is the Lexile reader measure. Again, this is the ability of students to comprehend the text that they read. And that's an important distinction. It's not a measure of reading fluency. It's not a measure of decodability. It's a measure of a student's ability to draw meaning from the words on the page. And so when you see a Lexile reader measure, it indicates at what degree of difficulty is a text, again, too easy, too hard, or just right for a particular student. So those two types of Lexile measures really help us to gauge that interaction between individual students and the text that they read. So to illustrate this point, here on this slide, on the left, you see a young lady who just so happens, hypothetically, to have a Lexile measure of 770L. And if you imagine that we sit her down with a piece of text, in this case, Sharon Creech's Walk Two Moons, that also has a 770 Lexile text measure, we understand that this is a quote unquote perfect match. In other words, this young lady is going to see enough simple sentence structure and enough familiar vocabulary to make her reading of this book very comfortable. But at the same time, she's going to see enough new vocabulary and enough more complex sentence structure to continue growing her reading skills. Again, it's back to Vygotsky. It's back to that zone of proximal development and what students need to continue their growth. So obviously, we want to focus on students' independent reading skills. There are simply not enough hours in the day to give every student the independent practice that he or she needs with texts that they can comprehend. Now, we know here at Metametrics, based on our research from over 4 decades of work in this space, that the greatest growth, the optimal degree of growth, happens when a student is reading in his or her Lexile zone. So from 100 Lexiles below the student's measure to 50 Lexiles above the student's measure. That's the quote unquote sweet spot where students grow more than they do if they're growing outside of that zone. So imagine for a moment a student has that 770 Lexile measure. What that means is to maximize the optimal growth for that child. That child ought to be reading independently text from about 670L up to about 820L. Now, please understand, it's not a hard and fast rule. That's just a rough estimate of where the research suggests that a student's zone of proximal development really is. Absolutely, if a child wants to read a book outside of that Lexile zone, from 100L below to 50L above, by all means, let the child read the book. That's critically important to the breadth and depth of the kind of reading that they do. But it really is important to think about, if I have a reluctant reader, or if I have a reader that almost refuses to read text. In those situations, we really want to maximize the limited opportunities we have for that student encountering text. And that's where Lexile measures really come in beneficial. But of course, as classroom teachers, we all don't have the ability to assign independent reading and turn a classroom full of students loose to read on their own. Oftentimes, we are doing group instruction, whole class instruction, where we have grade level expectations that we need to communicate, that we need to raise the bar in terms of complex texts to raise that student objective over time. Here too, Lexile measures are really, really beneficial, because when you know the ability of the reader on the Lexile scale, and when you know the complexity of a certain piece of text that we're teaching that day, an instructional leader can begin to think about what scaffolding is needed to help individual students, groups of students, maybe even the whole class, be successful with that text. So for example, if I have to teach a piece of text that I know is well beyond my students' independent reading ability, it triggers me to begin to think about, well, how can I help them with vocabulary? What words can I front load to help them be successful with this text? What complex sentences do I need to unpack for my students so that when they hit those sentences, they know how to process the information that's included and go from there? So in both in the realm of independent reading and in the realm of reading instruction, these Lexile measures, both the student measure and the text complexity measure, are really, really advantageous. So if this sounds familiar, it probably should, as most of the modern text complexity models indicate. Text complexity is really based on three aspects. You often hear this referred to as the three-legged stool. So we have qualitative measures of text complexity. We have quantitative measures of text complexity. And then the idea of matching readers and texts and tasks. Well, Lexile measures are completely down here in the quantitative leg of that three-legged stool. That is not to say that there are not times where the qualitative measures or the reader and task considerations may sometimes outweigh or overwhelm this quantitative measures. And one of the things I would really encourage everyone to consider is that a Lexile measure is never the end of a conversation about what books are right for what kids. A Lexile measure, any quantitative measure, is a starting point in that conversation. It is a stepping stone to better understand that relationship between reader and text, and begin to think about how we may need to mitigate that relationship for each individual reader, again, groups of readers, whole classes, whatever that may be. With that said, please understand Lexile measures are a great tool. They are not the end-all be-all. So I have a tool here, actually right here on the floor next to me. I have a hammer. Hammer is a great tool, really, really useful for a lot of things when it comes to hanging pictures on the wall or pounding a nail back into a door frame, whatever that may be. But if I have a plumbing problem, a hammer it's probably not the greatest tool. It really limits what I can do and what I can make sense of. So Lexile measures are the same way. They do some things really, really well, but they also have limitations. And so what you see here on both sides of that coin is there are a limitation to Lexile measures. So let me start on the left here. Again, on the text side, so looking at books, a Lexile measure does not represent what is age appropriate in terms of content. The example I often use for teachers is Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. If you look at the Lexile measure of that text, it appears to be at about 670 L. It seems to be very simple for like a third or a fourth grader. However, those people who know that content know the content there is not appropriate for a grader. I mean, we have issues of rape, we have issues of racism, we have issues of all sorts of things that it requires a more mature reader to engage. Likewise, text supports are not factored in to a Lexile measure. So if you're looking at a textbook that often has all these ancillary sidebars and graphs and charts and pictures, none of that is taken into account with a Lexile measure. Again, it's looking at words, sentences, and paragraphs. And then finally, text quality is not addressed. So just because a Lexile measure is high does not mean a book is good. Similarly, just because a Lexile measure is low does not mean a book is bad. Similarly, on the right-hand side of this slide, Lexile reader measures don't tell us everything we need to know about a child. Certainly, interest and motivation, background knowledge are really, really important. And I'll tell a quick story here on my oldest son, who a few years ago was really into dinosaurs. He read everything he could get his hands on about dinosaurs. And for him, he knew the names of the dinosaurs. He didn't struggle over those. On that topic, he could read well above his unique Lexile measure because he had that background knowledge, because he knew those names and was not overwhelmed by them. If you would have handed my son at the time a book about a different topic, gardening, I'm just going to throw out as an example, his Lexile measure would have been much lower. He has, candidly, he has no background knowledge in that. He has no interest, no motivation in gardening. And that reading would have been a complete struggle for him. But obviously the last one is understanding that context, knowing your students, understanding where the Lexile measure for students and where the Lexile measure for text interact is really, really the most important part. And I want to point everyone to the bullet down here at the very bottom. Again, Lexile measures are a tool. They help inform trying to find just right text for the just right student. They are not, however, a replacement for the judgment of a parent, of a classroom teacher, for a librarian, for an administrator. They are simply a stepping stone to make better decisions about the texts that we pair with our students. So to begin to wrap this segment up here just a little bit, the value and utility of Lexile measures and the Lexile framework as a whole. Number one, as I said, we can begin to target instruction to the unique abilities of students. We can actually forecast a comprehension rate. When we know the student's Lexile measure, when we know the Lexile measure of a text, we can actually forecast, well, about how much of this book is the student going to understand and be able to absorb and do something with. But again, as I said, when you know both of those measures, it really helps you to begin to alter your instructional planning, to think about that instructional scaffolding, about how to differentiate instruction and help every student be successful with the books he or she has to read. Another point, kind of like Mike showed with the quantile grade level charts, there's a similar Lexile growth chart. We can really begin to monitor progress toward college career readiness and even toward individual occupations. So when a child says, when a child answers that age-old question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And that child says, well, I want to be just like my mom. I want to be an electrician. We can actually point to the Metametrics research and say, okay, fantastic. You want to be an electrician. Well, a first-year electrician is asked to read materials at about this Lexile level. And that allows us to begin to make those plans to think about how do we help that child succeed and realize those goals so that when he or she graduates from high school or finishes that apprenticeship and begins that first year as an electrician, how can we help them be successful? It's a great conversation starter for students, for educators, for families at large. And then finally, again, back to that concept, it's a single common scale that allows everyone to understand student achievement from pre-kindergarten all the way through the post-secondary realm, literally cradle to grave. That sounds negative. I don't mean it that way, but literally this is a scale that can help students comprehend and understand their abilities over their entire lifetime. So very quickly, and I am running out of time, so Mike was far more judicious with his time than I was. I'm not going to go into the hub live, but I do want to mention that in that same Lexile and Quantile hub that Mike was showing you, there are a variety of different Lexile tools. Many of them are parallel. So the Lexile version for reading is parallel to the Quantile version for mathematics. So things like the grade level charts, the growth planner, the career database, the measures manager, all of those function in the very same manner, Lexile side or Quantile side. The difference is merely the content area. So a quick summary here of the various Lexile tools that you find within the hub. Find a book, which is by far and away our most popular tool, helps pair students with books that are, one, in their Lexile zone, as we talked about, but more importantly, about topics that student wants to read about. So if a student says, I want to read a book about animals, you can filter the results and find a book to do that. Or the student wants books that are humorous, you can do that and find a book. The analyzer is another tool. You can jump in. For example, you find a piece of text that you want to teach. You're curious to know what the Lexile measure is for that. You can copy and paste the text. You can dump it into the analyzer, and you can get a Lexile measure quick and easy, literally in 3 seconds or less, to know the Lexile measure of that text. Our word list tool, it helps identify key vocabulary by both grade level and subject. So if you want to know what are the most frequently used words in 4th grade science textbooks, you can use our word list. You can generate that list and you can see a breakdown of here are the X number of words that are most frequently used in 4th grade level science textbooks. Our career database speaks to what I talked about earlier, that child who wants to be an electrician. You can look up what are the reading demands of a first-year electrician to better process what that student's end goal is. Where is that target? Where are we trying to help that student reach? Our measures manager, that's a tool that helps educators in particular mitigate any discrepant measures. So as Mike and Mark both said, you all there in Nevada are getting Lexile and Quantile measures from both Smarter Balanced and also from NWA MAP. You may be getting them elsewhere additionally. Sometimes they don't always agree. And so the Measures Manager tool is a way to plug in both the numbers you have for a student and kind of see our recommendations on which number or what median number you all should use in terms of matching students with text based on the characteristics of those assessments, based on a number of other factors. Our Growth Planner tool is a way to help visualize student growth over time. In short, you plug in some data points, Lexile measures from the Smarter Balanced assessment, and the system actually forecasts that student's trajectory toward high school graduation. So that child can actually see, well, if I continue on this path, when I graduate high school, I'm going to have a Lexile measure of about X. And it really helps them, again, begin to visualize those goals for the future, where they want to be. And then the conversation begins. How do we help change that trajectory? Mike discussed the grade level charts. Again, national normative data, just like on the Quantile side, it helps you understand where does a particular child compare to the national average or the typical student at a particular percentile. And then the last two bullets on this slide are brand new tools that were just released in the last month for our colleagues in the K-1-2 space who are dealing with the science of reading and decodables. We have two brand new tools. Find a decodable book, which actually allows you to search decodable books by various vowel sounds, and also our decodable passages, which are find and printable decodable passages classroom educators can use for practice. Literally, you go in, again, free access. You can print off the passages. It includes the text. It includes a kind of picture to help grab the student's interest, and even a couple of comprehension questions for that text. So very quickly, a couple of takeaways. So with Lexile measures, again, we can gauge the degree of challenge between individual students and the difficulty of text in all the myriad of ways I described. Understanding both of those measures is really, really helpful when it comes to planning our instruction in the classroom. You literally have access to more than 100 million. That's not an exaggeration. That's an accurate number. More than 100 million articles, books, websites, other texts that already have a Lexile measure. So again, there in the state of Nevada, Smarter Balanced, NWA MAP, whatever else you may be using, if you know your student's Lexile measure, you can compare that to the Lexile measure of text and begin to plan. These measures also allow us to really take a longitudinal view of student growth. Like I said, helping students map out and visualize where they may want to be in terms of their post-secondary plan. And then finally, we can help students and teachers and families understand learning and progress over time. Sometimes this can be really complicated for families in particular, trying to understand, how is my kid doing? These measures, because it's one scale that, again, cradle to grave, it's one scale that the family has to learn. And with that knowledge, they can use and make it work. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to questions. If you all have any. I did want to put in a quick plug. Metametrics here, Dave, myself, Jane, and Kate, who were not able to join us this evening. We host office hours every Monday and every Friday, noon to 2 Pacific on Mondays and 8 a.m. to 10 Pacific on Fridays. you see the Zoom links here. We'll share these around with everybody. Feel free to jump in anytime. These are come and go events. Pop in, ask the question, or talk about an issue, get the information you need, and you can pop right back out and get on with your day. Also, if these times do not work for you because of your school schedule, please take advantage of my Calendly link. You can book an appointment with us at any time at the link that you see there on your screen. So with that, I want to thank you all for letting me intercede here and do a little bit of Lexile 101, as we call it. But with that, I will turn things back over to Mike and to Mark, and I'm happy to entertain any questions you all have.
Thank you, Matt, for that wonderful presentation on Lexile. We really appreciate you coming here this afternoon and sharing that wealth of information with all of us. And thank you, David, as well as attending. Allison, just wanted to open it up. You have the experts in the room.
No questions about Lexiles. We're used to that. We had accelerated reader and color coding all our books in the library, so I don't have any questions about that.
All right, great. Well, if you do have anything that comes up in the future, please feel free to reach out to us here at the department. And if we don't know the answer, we will definitely reach out to the experts at Metametrics. So I'm going to turn it back to Mike. Mike, do you want to close this out?
Sure. Thank you very much, Mark. And if there are no questions, I would give back 8 minutes of your time. And thank you very much for coming. We would keep the Google site open. If you have to go back and look back, you can just click on those links that we've shared with you. That being said, thank you very much for our resource person, David and Matt. And thank you, Mark, for being with us, and Allison and everybody out there. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Have a good night.
Thank you.